Who would have thought it? Complaining all the time and creating a hobby of pointing at problems, mumbling into every microphone you can find, look, there's another problem. That you'd earn yourself a reputation as a sourpuss. Hi everybody, I'm Beebs Kelley. Welcome back to another video. Thank you so much for joining me. Please do consider subscribing if you haven't already. Click the like button and leave a comment only if you want to. If you don't know what to comment, just say sour. So Harry and Meghan, it's no secret, they have a negative public image. And it's not just that they're frequently voted the most disliked public figures, that they're unpopular and are magnets for well-deserved criticism. It's beyond that. It's well beyond that at this point. Harry and Meghan have negative images because they communicate negatives all the time. When you see Harry and Meghan talking, what are they talking about? Something negative, probably, most likely. Whenever they have a public platform of any kind, be it press or panels or interviews, it's sour. It's on a sliding scale, of course, ranging from a sprinkling of pessimism to fully drenched in despair. But to be sure, never have the Sussexes had a wholly positive showing, really. Everything has a reference to something negative. Both Harry and Meghan are guilty of masterfully weaving in digs, complaints, or arguments into every single opportunity. No matter how irrelevant the comment may be, their motto may just be, never miss a chance to whine. Even something that you would think would be easy to make a wholly positive outing. Like, for example, Meghan Markle attending, or sort of attending, the Children's Hospital Gala in Los Angeles not that long ago, where she re-wore Nightmare Boobs dress. Horrific outing. I'll link the video for you. But when she was asked a couple of questions and she was talking about Children's Hospital, she did so in a very strange way and then wove in that she has friends, still some from high school and mom friends now, whose children are there going through treatment still, or something like that. What she said made no sense, so don't try to figure it out. But the point is, she still wove in these unnecessary details that were clearly only there to serve the purpose of clapping back at allegations or just simply reports that she struggles to maintain friendships because of a use and discard pattern, and to have a sort of comeback to the bullying reports that have circulated. So she took her comments about Children's Hospital and was able to weave in these unnecessary details that were very out of place, and it took a negative spin that, oh my gosh, you know children who are going to Children's Hospital for treatment now? My goodness, what a somber thing to say with a smile on your face. Listen, we don't need to cover a list of every example of this sort of complaining, whining mentality that finds its way into every single moment of opportunity for the Sussexes. That would take too long and it would grow boring very quickly and test your patience. But if you're new to the Sour Sussex saga, I would suggest you take a look at this playlist or this next playlist that I'll link for you here or at the end of today's video, and you'll be able to get a recap of everything that's happened, or a trip down memory lane to remind yourself of the problematic behaviors they've exhibited. Sometimes people are like, what did they even do? Why do people dislike the Sussexes so much? What even is the problem with Harold and the Meg? Well, that's no longer a short answer, so just go watch the videos. Anyway, both the Sussexes are guilty of this in slightly different arenas or slightly different ways. Harry, for example, will frequently throw in a weirdly competitive, conspicuous comment that has almost no relevance to the conversation at hand, just to get in a complaint about the media or a comment that paints his family in a bad light, out of spite, I suppose. While Meghan, without fail, will include an anecdote of how hard done by she's been at every opportunity. Or, as we've been talking about, the Meg's list will come into play and she will clap back at some sort of comment or headline recently that she thinks needs correcting in some way, or a counter narrative of some kind. This bad habit that they have, both together and on their own, is a massive part of their problems because it simply gained them the reputation of complainers, negative Nancys, immature, whiny, overly sensitive sourpusses. Man baby has been used to describe Harry, for example, and that's not a good look. It's a bad image in general, but even worse for people who are super privileged and wealthy. Because there's simply no reason to be that unpleasant and defeatist when you've made it in some capacity, when you don't deal with basic financial challenges and struggles that everyday people deal with when it comes to getting good education and maintaining a good job and everything being in working order from their car to the house, being able to afford repairs when needed, being able to afford time to take off for your health or things like that. All of these sorts of problems are things that Harry and Meghan just don't have to deal with because they have enough financial stability and wealth to handle a lot of life's basic problems and needs. And so it's much more difficult for the public to give the Sussexes that space to complain when it's so glaringly obvious that they have very little to complain about. They've become synonymous with glum vibes. And perhaps more importantly, it's made them entirely unsympathetic. It's very difficult to connect with the viewpoint of someone who appears malcontent and difficult, primarily. And so now the risk is very real for the public to simply dismiss Harry and Meghan's calls to action on various issues as simply overblown, just as they were overly sensitive and overdramatic and overblew their New York City car chase. They described it as nearly catastrophic. That's overdramatic, overreactive. And so Harry and Meghan developing this image as overly sensitive and overdramatic and blowing things out of proportion paired up with this negativity and this sort of grouchy vibe means the public can't really identify or receive Harry and Meghan saying this issue is really important. We need to come together to solve this. It's really difficult for the public to take that and be like, yeah, we should. Because instead, they have this reputation as overreacting to things. So now, the public has begun to dismiss Harry and Meghan's initiatives as, well, we're kind of overreacting again. Like, for example, in their recent video that they put out, where they discussed digital violence against children. That phrase alone, especially coming out of Harry and Meghan's mouths, sounds overdramatic, overly intense. Because digital is virtual. There's no physical contact on the face of that. That statement doesn't really link up with violence very well. And Harry and Meghan haven't just been overdramatic about their time in New York City, where they were not at any real risk to their safety, but they've also been overly sensitive to their time with the royals and with media coverage. Even comedians got in on this, pointing out that Harry and Meghan were just dealing with everyday problems, small potatoes, things like normal in-law issues, not any sort of be it sexist or otherwise, not any sort of unfair bullying, but rather normal run-of-the-mill public figure criticisms, observations, feedback, regular family shifts in dynamics that take time to work out the kinks. At this point, the public's leaning far more into simply tuning out the Sussexes altogether because they're either complaining about small problems or they're repeating the same stories about when they peaked as preteens. It's really unbecoming. This sort of resentful bummer persona that they have has also been seen as a symbol of their privilege in and of itself. The public already know that they are incredibly privileged, and they can't forget it because the Sussexes are keen to use their titles every chance they get. And so what are the public seeing? What are we seeing of the Sussexes now, at this point? They're seeing two people who have all of their needs met, and most of their wants can be met as well. Very, very privileged people. And these are the two people who are going around pointing at problems and complaining publicly all the time, which is a privilege to do so. They don't have to actually work to pay their bills. They can instead just go around talking about and reminding people about various problems that they've seen. Who has no idea about what real life is actually like, no concept even of the solutions needed to fix the problems, not a real good understanding of the problem itself or the root causes of it, no real grasp on what they're even pointing at or pontificating about. This sort of gig that they've carved out or are trying to carve out for themselves is a luxury, really, for them at the end of the day. If they really are feeling burnt out, for example, or stressed out, or they're overwhelmed or have negative mood states hit them for whatever reason, they can take a hiatus from work. They can have nannies, maids, cooks come by to help look after the kids, keep the family running, keep the house clean. They can take a vacation at the drop of a hat. And so this pattern of complaining and having negative talking points feature so prominently in their public-facing lives, paired up with their privilege, might just be the most powerful factor to this indifference that the public has towards them now. Most people can't afford to escape the problems that they face on an everyday basis, not to mention societal ones and big picture problems. Furthermore, most people can't even afford to be that negative. They simply don't have the time or the mental capacity or the emotional bandwidth to think about and be concerned about these bigger problems that are a little bit more obscure, because most people are really, really focused and their plate is completely overflowing with their everyday issues, just simply trying to keep things moving in the right direction and get to work on time and take care of their kids and make ends meet with their bills and the housing and all the inflation issues. Like, all of this stuff is already too much for most everyday people just because of the way things are right now. So the patience for people like Harry and Meghan to pontificate on issues or tell people that they need to be more conscious of the environment while they're being hypocritical on top of it all is just not there. There's just no patience for it. And that's part of why in our recent video we discussed the big difference. At least it should be up by now. If not, it'll be up next and I'll link it for you. But that's part of why when we discussed Harry versus William's approach to their TV presence and talking about issues, how William's solutions-based approach to the Homewards program is much more reassuring for people, to where they can digest this issue of homelessness with a sense of reassurance that somebody is trying to make some solutions actually happen. That's a much more positive space where people have the tolerance to listen to it. Whereas with Harry, people don't really have the tolerance to listen to him drone on about online bullying and online safety because of all these reasons we've discussed. Like, think about that coworker or an acquaintance or a relative even that you have who's just kind of like a doom and gloom advocate. Any conversation that you're having with this person or anything that you do around this person can quite easily be steered into a larger, much more serious implication or bigger issue. Like, for example, you get out a notebook and they start telling you about deforestation, or you're having a salad and they tell you about pesticides, or you're reading an ebook on your Kindle and they tell you about the damage that the microchips are causing or something like that. Anything and everything can get a negative spin and it feels overwhelming and you throw up your hands and you feel like, well, then you solve these problems because I'm just trying to get by. That's no fun for anyone to be around. And that's what Harry and Meghan have become. Those negative Nellies that you really just don't want to hear from anymore. Those who you just don't have any sympathy for. So as Harry and Meghan continue to try to lean on their victim narratives, they have found it's no longer working, not even a little bit, because they've officially made themselves entirely unsympathetic. And that's why even when they're trying to do something good, like Harry with Scotty's little soldiers, or trying to put out a neutral statement about some sort of cause. That's why they're unable to see any sort of turnaround on public opinion with these things, and why they're not getting even the slightest bit of praise for their involvement in any cause. Not just that they publicize it selfishly, that they have to inform people anytime they do something like send a letter out to a charity. At this point, people aren't softening for them no matter what they try because they've dug their hole far too deep to get out of. And people just no longer want to hear from them at all. And all this is setting aside, like, not to mention, of course, the general repulsion people have to the airing of private family matters in public, or lying and exaggerating, or any of the other antics. For a long time, people have felt this way about the Sussexes. The problem is that it's growing beyond that to the point where people who haven't followed the story very closely, or people who are sort of new in their exposure to the Sussexes, that even they are finding the Sussexes to be very unsympathetic and very annoying just by virtue of all of these things. So many social norms broken, so many boundaries crossed, so many moral misjudgments on their part, that at this point, there really is very little hope for things to turn around for them. To see even just the low bit of effort that they put into these initiatives, like the Scotty's Little Soldiers thing being in the exact same outfit that he wore for the video to that conference, just, it's almost like they're not even trying at this point. It really doesn't make much sense. But it's clear, it's very, very clear that they've reached the point of no return for the public, because even the public who doesn't follow the royals don't like Harry and Meghan at this point. And it didn't used to be that way. It used to be that there was a small percentage of people who didn't really know the full story and still had a degree of acceptance or just open-mindedness towards Harry and Meghan. That's gone at this point. But I'm eager to read your thoughts in the comments. Leave your opinions below. Thank you so much for joining me for today's short little video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time. Have a happy day, everybody. Bye!